US Gulf War in 1991, Britain and America deliberately bombed Iraq's modern infrastructure. And when the war was over, the bombing continued. This was seldom reported. During this period of the 1990s, the UN imposed an economic blockade led by Britain and America. Essentials like clean water and vital drugs were denied. In 1998, the United Nations Children's Fund reported the deaths of 500,000 children under the age of 5, a direct result of the sanctions imposed by the blockade. This is Dennis Halliday, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, who resigned after refusing to administer the sanctions. In 1999, I traveled with him to Iraq.
The very provisions of the Charter, Declaration of Human Rights, have been set aside. And we are waging a warfare through the United Nations on the children and people of Iraq with incredible results that you do not expect to see in a war under the Geneva Conventions. We're targeting civilians, worse, we're targeting children like Safa, who of course were not born when Iraq went into Kuwait. I mean, what is this about? It's a monstrous situation for the United Nations, for the Western world, for all of us who are part of some democratic system, who are in fact responsible for the policies of our governments and the implementation of economic sanctions.
Khan Ross was a senior British diplomat at the UN responsible for imposing the embargo on Iraq. You gave evidence on the impact of sanctions.
Yes.
And this is what you said. The weight of evidence clearly indicates that sanctions caused massive human suffering among ordinary Iraqis, in particular children. We, the US and UK governments, were the primary engineers and defenders of sanctions and were well aware of this evidence at the time. But we largely ignored it or blamed all these effects on the Saddam government. Sanctions effectively denied the entire population the means to live, unquote. That's a shocking admission.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I stand by it today.
Why didn't you speak out during those 4.5 years?
There is a certain macho culture in foreign policy circles that to talk about things like humanitarian suffering when you're dealing with Saddam Hussein is a bit wet. You know, that it's not what the issue's really about, that governments do security, that's the kind of hard thing that we're there to provide. And I think, however wrong your decisions may be, whatever damage you may do to other individuals, there is, at the end of the day, no accountability whatsoever. We had extraordinarily good resources to put together our story, to find little facts to justify their story, factoids I began to call them.
And how eagerly would journalists accept these factoids?
They had very little chance to do anything other than accept our version of events and more or less relay it unedited to the public. Government is an information machine, and we would control access for journalists to us, to governments. When I was in news department in the Foreign Office, we would control access to the Foreign Secretary as a form of reward to journalists if they were critical, if we felt they were too hostile to our account of events. We would not give them the goodies of trips with the Foreign Secretary around the world, or exclusive interviews every now and then. We did the same in New York. If journalists were not particularly supportive to our account, we would freeze them out. We would make life harder for them. But there is a subtle and private relationship between them, which is basically of favoritism, that certain journalists are rewarded with access for being supportive of the story. They will basically tell journalists, you carry on with that line, that kind of unjustified criticism of our government policy on X, Y, or Z, we will punish you. And that is very explicit, those kinds of threats. What happened was not an intelligence-based process. It was basically a PR process run by Number 10 to produce a document that was much more politically credible than the evidence suggested.
It was a major deception, wasn't it?
I think it amounts, in effect, to that, yes. I remember before I was sent to New York in late '97, I did the round of departments in London saying to them, okay, I'm going to New York, I'm going to be doing Iraq, what do I need to know? And I went to see Non-Proliferation Department in the Foreign Office, and I was expecting a briefing on the vast piles of weapons that we still thought Iraq possessed. And the desk officers sort of looked at me slightly sheepishly and said, well, actually, we don't think there's anything. We don't think there's anything in Iraq. I said, that's extraordinary. I mean, I thought we had sanctions because we thought Iraq had large amounts of weapons. He said, no. The justification for sanctions is basically that we have unanswered questions about how those stocks were destroyed in the past. But what I feel very guilty about it. I feel very ashamed about it. I feel ashamed about it sitting talking to you. You know, I feel actual shame running through my body when I talk to you about it.
Should journalists feel the same? Those who pass on the deception?
Absolutely. We should all be accountable to each other. I mean, I think that's the only way to have a civilized society, is some kind of transparency with each other and accountability, and people holding people morally accountable for what they do, and that applies to journalists as much as it applies to anybody.
These were to be the borders of Israel and Palestine when Israel was founded in 1948. And this is what's left of Palestine today, fragmented and dislocated by a military occupation that defies international law and is backed by one of the world's most sophisticated propaganda machines. This is Palestinian cameraman Imad Ghanin being shot repeatedly by Israeli soldiers. The killing of non-Western journalists is rarely news. Imad Ghanin was 21 and lost both his legs. Ten journalists have been killed by Israeli forces since 1992, and many more have been wounded. The pioneering Glasgow University Media Group has just published its latest study on the media reporting of Israel and Palestine.
I think what it comes down to is a basic knowledge that journalists have, which is quite simply that if they criticize Israel, then it's potentially trouble. If they criticize the Palestinians, then there is much less of a problem. So they might use a word like occupation, but they won't say military occupation, they won't say military rule, they won't explain in detail what it means. They certainly wouldn't do it routinely to explain in detail what it means to be living under military rule and why the Palestinians, from their point of view, are trying to overthrow that military rule, trying to throw off that control.
Professor Greg Philo heads the Glasgow unit. Looking at his research, and it comes through very clear, is a certain state of fear exists on who the Israelis will complain to. They say in the research, producers worried, will they complain at Director General level? Or will they just simply ring the newsroom? But the point is this sense of intimidation, almost.
Welcome to the world of a correspondent who has to deal with this pressure on a daily basis. Yes, where I would take issue with you is the fear factor, because actually no correspondent that I have come across who is used to working in Jerusalem particularly or dealing with this stuff fears it at all.
I was thinking of people here, a television centre.
We don't fear it either. We take a lot of it, but we don't fear it.
After we did the first book, I gave a number of talks to journalists in Britain, to BBC journalists, and I spent time with people who were senior producers on television news. And one of them said to me, in the context of quite a heated discussion that was going on with other journalists, he said, listen, he said, we wait in fear. That was his exact words. We wait in fear for the telephone call from the Israelis. He said, the only issue we face then is how high up it's come from them. Has it come from a monitoring group? Has it come from the Israeli embassy? And then how high has it gone up our organisation? Is it the duty editor? Is it gone above that? Is it the Director General? He said, he said, I have had journalists on the phone to me minutes before we've gone on a major news programme saying, what can I say? Which words can I use? Is it all right if I say this?